Hey everyone, I'm sorry this post is so late. We had an unexpected death last weekend in the family, so just kind of now getting back into things. So I apologize for the lateness. Okay, I was intentionally invited one time. I worked for a superintendent when I was a high school principal who allowed for some risk taking, allowed me to create programs and classes and clubs that were just completely outside the box. And then I felt like that showed a lot of trust and courage. I don't think everyone was on board. Maybe some of the board members might not have been on board with allowing us to do some of that outside the box stuff. And again, that just showed a lot of courage and trust. And we were able to do some creative things. I had, students that wanted to teach classes, and he said, "Sure, go ahead." Or we had French for Spanish speakers, and so French won, but Spanish is the base language for people, juniors and seniors that topped out in Spanish. We had a passions class where students could tell us what they wanted to learn. So he just allowed whatever wacky idea we'd come to him with. He'd say, "Sure, is that good for kids? Great, go do it." So I think I was unintentionally invited. As a teacher, I worked for a principal that was amazing at culture and climate, and just really was very likable. Worked hard, very positive, just really likable person, but really didn't quite understand from my perspective how all the pieces fit. Didn't really understand a lot about curriculum or special education. So this really led to a lot of undoing of things and a lot of sort of promises that maybe had to be broken, or it really sort of led to an uncertainty in my schedule almost on a daily basis, because things just kept changing, not intentionally. I mean, this person was trying their best, and I think just maybe had a lot to learn, was kind of newer. My example for unintentionally disinvited was working in a situation where the loudest voices had the most say. And I think, we've probably all been part of this situation at one time or another, but and that can be hard. It can be really hard for especially new administrators, to not let the loudest voices sort of make the decisions. I think it takes a lot of intentionality, but it really is important. And being a part of the situation really helped me be mindful as a leader. Now I've done it as a leader, and I wish I hadn't, but sometimes it's how you learn, and I have learned from it. And so I remember distinctly one time about a year and a half into being a high school principal, and I had a group of teachers that were lobbying for something, and each one of them was sort of pleading their case, and I really wasn't saying much. I was just kind of looking and listening, and one of them stopped and said, "Guys, he's going to pick the one that demonstrates the best, how we can help kids the best. So which one of us makes the best case for how this is good for kids, that's the one he's going to pick." And so at that point I said, "All right, okay, good. My message is getting across." My best example for intentionally disinvited was I worked for an administrator one time when I was an administrator, but the supervisor, I don't necessarily want to say the position, but would walk into meetings. He would facilitate the meetings, and he'd write a big NO on the board behind him. And anytime we would say anything, even remotely where it looked like we were asking for something, he would just point at the board, and that was very that wasn't a good feeling. So that wasn't a very productive environment, in my opinion. As far as my leadership goes, if I'm being honest, I think I function at all four levels. I don't think I'm intentionally disinviting very often. In fact, I'm not, but I've been there. I've made decisions out of frustration that I wouldn't have normally made, that I'm sure were intentionally disinviting to people. I've learned from that. I've grown from that. I think most of the time I am intentionally inviting, although unintentionally inviting is probably a close second. I'm a year and a half into my job right now that is largely problem solving and reactive. I'm being very reactive right now, and I think I'm doing pretty well being reactive, but I need to change that to more proactive as much as possible, and that's where more intentionality will come in. I think that would help me be more intentionally inviting, more often. I chose scenario 3, and I believe that the principal is operating in the intentionally disinviting category. I think anytime you post a bulletin that threatens a negative letter in a personnel file is sort of that assertive discipline, and not very good for culture climate. think posting anything in general, it might not be the best for culture climate. I mean, this was likely done out of frustration, which I understand. However, one of my responsibilities is to mentor our principals, our building principals, and I tell them all the time. I'm always reminding them, take the long way with decisions like this one. You take the long way, and the reason for the constant reminder is no one has time for the long way, but you got to make time. So in this situation, you gather your building leadership team. I mean, first you have to establish why the change is necessary, and maybe this principal did that, but you really have to establish why the change is necessary, assure them that they can make the change, and then help them along incrementally. Meet with your building leadership team, meet with your influential teacher leaders that are going to help push this forward for you. See where they're at, get them on board, see what their questions and concerns are. Do it face to face, talk with people, maybe even involve students and parents. You should really, as a leader, always match pressure with support. And if teachers have concerns, there's nothing wrong with making a mandatory workshop. I mean, that's part of it. Sometimes things are mandatory. But I think you need to listen to the teachers and see what their concerns are. And then sort of go from there. Maybe there's some kind of compromise. Maybe the workshops that they were otherwise going to miss, maybe those can be rescheduled at a different time. In addition to that, and principals will often reach for the quick decision. Geez, I've done it a lot. But because the day is busy, and time is precious. But big decisions and controversial decisions that require change, you have to go the long way to be effective.